Welcome to today's Seidokan Saturday. So today I want to first talk a little bit about the concept of Hojo Undo, auxiliary training. The whole point of it is that, again, as I mentioned last week, to have your knife sharpened, your gun cleaned and oiled, however you want to look at that a dull knife is no good in a fight. On top of that, let me give you this concept. If I have somebody who has a hard fighting spirit, just a fighter's attitude, and a lot of muscle and stamina and the will against a guy who knows a lot of karate moves but has never been hit in the face, can't do 20 push-ups all the way down, all the way up properly, not those little half push-ups you see a lot of people doing, but I mean can't really do a full push-up even, knows a lot of karate moves, can do all the fancy kicks, jump, spin, do his kata, won a tournament, has gold medals. Put him against that guy with muscle and an attitude, and I'll guarantee you where my money's going. I coached wrestling as an assistant coach, and our head coach had a nephew who was in our instructor's training program with the organization I belonged to, and he put his nephew, this new black belt, teenage black belt, in a headlock, and his nephew couldn't get out. Black belt couldn't get out of a headlock. This is 30 years ago. And it cemented this concept in my mind. And the coach came to me and said, what good's your black belt if you can't get out of a headlock? And I said, well, yeah, he should have been able to get out of that. But part of it was the headlock hurt, which made him go, eh. And the headlock was strong, which meant the kid needed some muscle. Even with the best of techniques, he needed at least some ability to apply that. And there are certain techniques you don't need a whole lot of muscle to apply, right? A finger in the eye or whatever. But for the most part, you're going to have at least some strength. Two stories, if you'll allow me. One, I believe it was the great Choshin Chibana, one of the founders. He's up here on my chart. No, he's not. Anyway, he's in the history of karate. He was a frail-looking little guy. And when he was a kid, his dad took him to a karate master to be taught. And the master looked at him and says, a frail little kid, he'll break. He can't do karate. So the dad took him home, tied a rope around the kid's waist, tied the other end of a rope to a post where he couldn't do much, and started poking him with a stick. And the kid tried to hide behind the post, and the dad came swatting at him with the stick. And the kid tried to cower and hide and cover up and crunch down, and dad kept poking at him with a stick. And over the course of days, weeks, months, I don't remember how long, at a certain point the kid had had enough, and he started to try to grab the stick and try to block it and tried to come back at his dad and grab the stick and hit his dad back with it. And when he got to that point, the dad took this still frail little kid back to the karate master, and the master said, I'll teach him now. He's still yet small and weak, but I see something in his eyes. That's the mettle, the indomitable spirit, the will, that toughness. Second story. When I was assistant coach as the wrestling coach again, we had a kid on the team who was just innately tough. I didn't know where this toughness came from. Moves that hurt other people, he would just go, yeah, so what? There's a move called a crossface where you grind your forearm across a guy in order to turn his head, which then allows you to get a grip and flip him over and put him on his back, pin him, so forth. And there are two responses to this. Because it hurts to have somebody's forearm and wrist grind across your cheekbone and your eye socket. There are two responses. One is, oh, hell, that hurts. And the other is, yeah, bring it, and just go right into it. Well, this kid had that, yeah, bring it attitude. And he would turn into what you're supposed to, that's the way to get out of it, is you turn into the crossface rather than allowing them to turn your head. But he just had that toughness where he could just grind into anybody no matter how hard they did it. And there's a way of doing that crossface where you kind of jam them, jar them a little bit, and it was like, it didn't bother him. And I didn't understand where this toughness came from until I was his mat side coach for a match one time. And it was the first time I'd been assigned to take his mat. So I was there and he was getting ready to go out on the mat, and he ran over to me and he pulled out his eye and put it in my hand and said, here, hold that, and ran out and wrestled. And I was, hey, I didn't know he had a glass eye. And so I'm looking at my hand and my hand's looking back at me. There's a story here. So when he got back, licked it, put it back in his face, had his eye back in, and said, okay, you got to tell me about this. Turns out when he was a few years younger, a teenager still, maybe between 12 and 14, somewhere in there, I forget his age, but he and a friend had been crossing a farmer's field in North Las Vegas back when it was just open fields and stuff, and The guy took offense to them crossing his property and shot at them with a shotgun. And it was shotgun that took this kid's eye out. Well, that creates a sense of toughness, doesn't it? Okay. There's two ways to learn how to fight. One is to train. The other, which is a little slower but equally effective, is to go to the worst bar in the worst part of town, get the biggest guy there, and tell him his mother is ugly and you had sex with her. When you get out of the hospital, repeat the process. And as long as you survive to go back each time, eventually you're going to become a good fighter, much like Choshin Shibana's dad poking with a stick. At a certain point, you're going to have accumulated experience and become a good fighter. The other is to train. Again, karate. Training without the physicality is an empty shell. The physicality without the knowledge is just, it's good toughness, and I would still put that guy up against somebody who knows the moves and can't do the other. This is why even today in some Okinawan dojos, the vast majority of a class is not learning punches, blocks, kicks, techniques, how to get out of a chokehold, how to defend against a punch or a kick or a headlock. The vast majority of the class is spent on Hojo Undo. Literally 50 to 75% of some classes is nothing but the conditioning exercises, because without those, that other little bit doesn't matter. If you're doing the 10% but not the 90, or the 25% and not the 75, whatever percentage you want to invent, okay, all statistics are made up on the spot according to a study I just invented. The training is what gives you that mettle. So with that, let's look at the iron palm bag. Technically not a part of Okinawan karate, it's more of a Chinese device. In Okinawan systems, you'll see rice bags or bean bags. They're usually a foot square or something, some form of something to hit, different than the makiwara. You won't see it a lot in a lot of Okinawan karate schools, but very useful device. I have a whole series of videos on how to do this. Just briefly, always start with your hand nice and relaxed. Allow the gravity to do the striking. I'm not going to swing and hit. That creates tension. That tension shocks the internal organs, bad for your health. You don't want to hit with stiffness. Very relaxed. Simply letting gravity in your body do the work. And you can train various parts of the hand, back of the hand, knife hand, dropping fist, fingertips, spear hands, so forth. So for striking, great device, okay? Second use of it, and this is for my friend Donnie Hayhurst, who said a few weeks ago or a month or so ago that his focus was going to be on helping develop his grip strength. We have two kinds of grip. We have grasping, which is the ability to close, and gripping, which is the ability to maintain an isometric hold. So moving versus isometric hold. The bag can help us with both. Now this one's full of steel shot, iron BBs. Never use lead. Rice and beans are going to be lighter. This is about a 15 to 18, I forget when I last weighed it. But it's a pretty heavy bag. So we're going to use our gripping, and there's another gripping tool, the nigirigame, the gripping jars, which we'll get to next week. But for gripping, this is very malleable. So we're going to take our claw hand and we're going to hold it out in front. Now this also develops forearm, shoulder. From here we drop it, grip it with the other hand. We're literally attacking the bag with our claw. Now I don't want to come under it and catch it here. That's just tossing and cheating. Yeah, it's 15 pounds. It's still a little bit to toss. But I want to come forward, gripping it with the clawing motion as we strike. Now you can also do this tossing back and forth with a partner. A little easier method is simply to lift, catch it on the way down, but again, using that gripping, clawing, catching. So as an Okinawan training device for catching and gripping, that iron palm bag is very effective. Again, you can start lighter with a rice bag, both for gripping and striking, then to beans, gripping and striking, and build up. Some use sandbags, and in common use today is the weighted sandbag with the two handles, and there are all sorts of training devices that are similar. But for grip and grasping strength, the ability to reach out and get something, I highly recommend the iron palm bag. Do your auxiliary training. Do the training, get yourself inured, which means accustomed or hardened into. Get yourself inured into where impact does not freeze you up. It will build not only your physical ability, your physical strength, but it will build your mettle, your internal fortitude, your guts, your will, your strength of will and spirit. That's one of the real values of Hojo Undo, is teaching yourself to dish out and to take the physical pain that it takes. Hone your weapons, sharpen your tools. It'll help your karate in the long run and enable you to defend yourself in a realistic environment. Okay? Hopefully that helps. Sorry I talked so much, but by now you know that's what I do. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next week for another Seidokan Saturday. Until then, keep training.